The first rule of fifth-generation air combat is, the pilot who detects first almost always wins. The second rule, less discussed and more unsettling, is this: the rule only holds if you know you're detecting first. At 4:52 a.m. over the eastern Mediterranean, that second rule became a tactical problem.
The exercise had been running for 6 days. A NATO maritime exercise, 7 nations, 3 carrier groups operating in the eastern Mediterranean basin under a combined air operations framework that put Allied fighters into shared airspace at all hours. The exercise was publicized, deliberate transparency, coordinated airspace notifications, the institutional machinery of NATO collective defense doing what it was designed to do visibly and loudly. Its publicized nature was its point. The presence of USS Harry S. Truman's carrier air wing in this airspace was not accidental and was not subtle.
What arrived at 4:52 a.m. was neither accidental nor subtle, and it was not expected. The E-2D Hawkeye orbiting at 26,000 feet, working the northeast sector, detected 2 contacts climbing from a coastal airfield in western Syria at 4:51 a.m. The airfield was Russian-operated. The contacts were climbing fast, military power from the outset, on a bearing of 282 southwest into the exercise area's eastern edge. The Hawkeye's tactical controller began the characterization process immediately. Emission profile, radar cross-section, climb rate, departure profile. The first 2 parameters produced anomalies that the controller flagged within 90 seconds of initial detection.
The emission profile did not match the flanker family. The N036 AESA radar emitted on a frequency hopping pattern that was documented in the NATO intelligence database as belonging to one aircraft type, the Su-57 Felon. The radar cross-section return on the Hawkeye's APS-145 was inconsistent with any flanker derivative. It was smaller, significantly smaller. Not fifth-generation small, not golf ball small, but measurably smaller than the 10-plus square meters that an Su-35S presents in clean configuration. The controller's initial estimate, between 0.8 and 1.4 square meters. The confidence band was wide. The implication was not. At 4:53 a.m., the assessment went up the chain in 2 words: possible felons. 2 F-35Cs from VFA 147 had been on CAP station since 4:20 a.m., holding at 38,000 feet in the northeast sector on a racetrack pattern that put them 140 kilometers west of the Hawkeye's detected contacts. The scramble was not a scramble in the traditional sense. Both aircraft were already airborne, already armed, already in the sector. It was a redirect, a bearing change, a throttle advance, and a tactical picture that had just become the most professionally consequential situation either pilot had encountered outside of a classified exercise. The lead pushed the nose onto bearing 095 and advanced both throttles toward military power. The sky at 38,000 feet at 4:53 a.m. in the eastern Mediterranean in late October was completely clear. No cloud, no haze, no moisture above 15,000 feet. The visibility was unlimited. On a clear night at this latitude, at this altitude, the stars were dense enough to create a false horizon at the edge of the windscreen, and the Mediterranean below was an absence of stars rather than a visible sea. The temperature outside the canopy was minus 56 degrees Celsius. At these temperatures, contrails formed immediately behind any aircraft in afterburner and persisted for 30 minutes in the still air. Both F-35Cs were not in afterburner. Military power only, a decision the lead had made before the redirect was complete. Stealth was not only about radar cross-section. It was about not drawing white lines across a dark sky that an adversary's optical sensors, data link, or ground-based radar could read. The Su-57 pilots had the same problem and had apparently made a different decision. The Hawkeye's infrared overlay, cross-referenced with the radar picture, showed clear afterburner signatures on both contacts from the moment of detection.
Two plumes, bright against the cold Mediterranean sky, drawing lines southwest at a rate that the controller calculated would put the contacts at the exercise area's eastern boundary in 9 minutes and 40 seconds. They were not approaching discreetly. They were approaching fast. Fast and loud in the electronic spectrum was consistent with a show of presence sortie, a demonstration, not an engagement. It was also consistent with the approach geometry of a crew that wanted to develop a picture before the opposing side could position. The Su-57's N036 radar, active from the moment of departure, was building a tactical picture of the exercise area in real time. At the ranges involved, the N036 could track the Hawkeye. It could likely track non-stealth NATO aircraft throughout the exercise area. What it was doing with the two F-35Cs holding at 38,000 feet, 140 kilometers to the west, was not yet clear. That uncertainty was the tactical problem. At 4:56 a.m., with the contacts 87 kilometers to the east, and closing, the lead activated the AN/APG-81 in low probability of intercept mode. The picture the LPI returns, built in the first 4.3 seconds of operation, was consistent with the Hawkeye's characterization. Two contacts, separated by 18 kilometers laterally. Altitudes 28,400 and 29,100 feet. Speeds Mach 1.08 and Mach 1.11 respectively. The radar cross-section values returned by the APG-81 at this range, in this geometry, from this aspect, 0.7 and 0.9 square meters, respectively. The lead processed that number and noted it with a specific kind of professional attention. The F-35C's own frontal radar cross-section from the same aspect geometry was approximately 0.005 square meters. The Su-57's documented frontal stealth performance had been assessed in the intelligence community as significantly better than legacy Russian platforms, but significantly worse than U.S. 5th-generation fighters. The number 0.7 to 0.9 square meters was consistent with those assessments. It was also, at the ranges involved, an aircraft that the APG-81 could track. What the APG-81 could not determine, from LPI mode at 87 kilometers, was whether the N036 radars on the Su-57S could track the F-35CS back. The usual BVR confidence, I can see you, you cannot see me, was not available. Not yet. Possibly not at all. This was the moment the second rule became a tactical problem rather than an abstract principle. At 4:57 a.m., the Hawkeye controller transmitted, Falcon lead, sentry. Two contacts, assess possible felon, bearing 095, range 74 kilometers. N036 emissions active, sector scan. No targeting lock detected on any friendly at this time. No targeting lock detected at this time. The qualifier carried the weight of everything the intelligence assessment could not confirm. The N036's low probability of intercept mode had been documented in technical assessments as capable, though its operational performance parameters in a contested EW environment against a well-equipped opposing force were not fully characterized. Whether the absence of a detected targeting lock meant the Su-57 crews had not locked the F-35Cs, or meant the Su-57 crews had locked them in a mode the Hawkeye's sensors could not detect, was not a question the Hawkeye's controller could answer. The lead held LPI track and worked the problem with what was known. Known, two contacts, radar cross-section consistent with Su-57, closing at Mach 1.09 average. Known, N036 emissions active, no confirmed targeting lock on friendly aircraft. Unknown, whether the Su-57 crews had a picture that included the F-35C's actual positions. Unknown, intent. Unknown, ordnance state. The Su-57 had been observed in operational configuration carrying R-77-1B VR missiles with estimated range of 110 kilometers. Its internal bay configuration had been photographed, but never fully confirmed in terms of combat load for this specific operational context. The unknowns were stacking up in a way that the lead had not encountered before in an operational intercept. This was not the comfortable geometry of a legacy radar platform being tracked from 160 kilometers in complete ignorance. This was a pier, or something close enough to a pier that the difference required proof to establish. At 4:58 a.m., the Wingman transmitted on the tactical discrete. Lead 2, RWR, intermittent, N036 emission bearing 095, confidence low, duration 0.4 seconds. The Wingman's RWR had registered a 0.4 second N036 pulse on the bearing of the Su-57 contacts. Not a sustained lock tone, an intermittent pulse. Too brief to characterize as a targeting lock, but too directional to dismiss as general sector scan emission. The AN/ASQ239 electronic warfare suite had flagged it and passed it to the RWR display. Duration 0.4 seconds. Bearing 095. Confidence low, meaning the pulse duration was insufficient for the system to characterize the emission mode with high confidence. Either the N036 had swept the Wingman's position in normal sector scan and happened to produce a detectable pulse at that bearing, or the N036 had briefly illuminated the Wingman in a targeting mode too brief to trigger the threat level classification.
The two interpretations had very different tactical implications.
The lead made a decision. 2. Lead. Turn cold. Drop to 32,000. Maintain LPI only. Do not go active.
The Wingman turned cold, away from the contacts, and descended 6,000 feet. The geometry change placed the Wingman outside the most favorable aspect for the N036's frontal performance while maintaining the LPI track at the new altitude. If the 0.4 second pulse had been a genuine illumination, the cold turn denied a follow-on tracking solution. If it had been incidental sector scan emission, the cold turn cost nothing except some fuel and lateral position. At 4:59 a.m., range to the contacts, 62 kilometers. The lead's LPI track was solid and the fire control solutions on both contacts were building. Confidence on contact 1, the southern aircraft, 71%. Confidence on contact 2, the northern aircraft, 68%. Both values were lower than the same geometry would produce against a legacy platform at this range, because the Su-57's smaller radar cross-section required more processing time and more returns for the APG-81's algorithms to achieve the same statistical confidence. The solutions were valid. They were not as clean as they would have been against the aircraft this crew had been intercepting for the past 3 years of operational deployments. The difference was real, and it was professionally uncomfortable. It was approximately 12 percentage points of fire control confidence at 62 kilometers. Against a legacy flanker at this range, the confidence would be 83 to 85%. Against what the APG-81 was tracking now, it was 68 to 71%. At 5:01 a.m., the second friction event arrived without warning. The lead's AN/APG-81 LPI mode dropped contact 1 from track. Not a temporary loss, the contact's return had shifted. The radar cross-section value changed from the 0.7 square meters the system had been building a model around to a return the size filter was struggling to separate from clutter at this range and geometry. The contact had maneuvered, a turn that changed its aspect angle relative to the APG-81's beam, presenting a lower cross-section face to the tracking radar. The Su-57's stealth shaping was anisotropic, better from the frontal quarter, significantly worse from the sides and rear, but with a stealth profile across aspect angles that was more complex and less predictable than any Russian aircraft the lead had engaged before. The Russian pilot had just demonstrated that he knew something about aspect management against AESA-based fire control radars. He had not acted on anything the lead had transmitted or done.
He had simply maneuvered at a moment that cost the F-35C's tracking algorithm 8.4 seconds of contact continuity. Whether the timing was deliberate or coincidental could not be determined from inside the cockpit. The LPI reacquired contact 1 at 5:01 a.m. and 21 seconds, at a range of 57 kilometers, with a new aspect angle that the fire control algorithm characterized as the Su-57's three-quarter rear aspect. Radar cross-section at this aspect, 2.1 square meters, larger, more trackable, easier to hold. The Su-57's aspect management had worked once and then inadvertently surrendered a more favorable tracking geometry by continuing the turn. Fire control confidence climbed to 76% in under 3 seconds. At 5:02 a.m., range to contact 1, 52 kilometers. Range to contact 2, 54 kilometers. The N036 emissions on the Hawkeye's feed changed mode at 5:02 a.m. and 11 seconds. Not sector scan. Single target track, a sustained high pulse repetition frequency emission on a specific bearing. The Hawkeye controller called it immediately. Falcon lead, Sentry. Contact 2 N036 in single target track. Bearing unknown from this geometry. Confirm RWR status. Sentry, Falcon lead. RWR negative lock. No STT tone received, which meant one of two things. Contact 2 had locked a non-F-35C asset in the exercise area, a Hawkeye, a non-stealth Allied fighter, a surface unit, or Contact 2 had achieved a lock on an F-35C in a mode that the F-35C's RWR was not detecting. The second possibility required the N036 LPI mode to be performing at a level that current intelligence assessments rated as possible but not likely. It required the Su-57 crew to be operating a sensor system at a performance envelope that had not been confirmed in any collected technical intelligence. The lead cross-checked the exercise area picture on the Link 16 feed. The nearest non-stealth Allied asset to the Su-57 contact's bearing of STT emission, a Spanish F-18C holding at 22,000 feet, 110 kilometers to the northwest. Outside the R-77's nominal engagement range, outside the geometry of the STT bearing the Hawkeye had characterized. The Hawkeye was itself on that bearing, 89 kilometers distant and non-stealth. The STT could be on the Hawkeye. The Hawkeye was not a combatant. It was a command and control asset with no defensive options beyond an egress turn. If the Su-57 crew was holding a fire control lock on the Hawkeye, the tactical picture had changed in a way that the rules of engagement addressed with specific clarity. At 5:02 a.m. and 40 seconds, the lead went active. Full APG-81 power, track mode, both contacts simultaneously. Contact 1 at 51 kilometers, Contact 2 at 53 kilometers. No LPI economics. The decision, if the Su-57 crews did not know the F-35Cs were there, they would know now. If they already knew, active radar changed nothing except giving the fire control solutions the confidence they needed. The fire control solutions on both contacts reached green within 2.1 seconds of full power activation. Contact 1, 51.3 kilometers, all parameters valid. Contact 2, 52.8 kilometers, all parameters valid. 2 AIM-120D solutions, both green, both within employment range, both confirmed. The Su-57 crew's RWR responses came within 0.6 seconds of the APG-81's full activation. Both aircraft. The N036 on Contact 2 dropped from single target track to wide sector scan in 0.3 seconds. The Russian RIO's immediate response to a new, high-confidence, unknown source lock from a bearing he had not detected a moment earlier. The bearing his RWR was now registering for the incoming APG-81 emissions, west-southwest, from the direction of two aircraft he had not confirmed as present. Both Su-57s began maneuvering simultaneously. Not a brake turn, not the committed 5G disengagement geometry of a crew that has decided to leave. A lateral spread, the two contacts pushing apart from their 18-kilometer separation to 30, then 40 kilometers, while maintaining their general heading. The maneuver was a tactical response to a lock from an unlocated source. Spread the formation to deny a single weapons employment solution against both aircraft simultaneously, and use the spread geometry to try to triangulate the bearing and range of the locking radar from two different positions. It was a sophisticated response, executed in under 4 seconds from RWR activation to formation change. Not a panicked break. A calibrated adaptation by two crews who had clearly briefed how to respond to exactly this scenario. The lead noted it. The Wingman, now back on bearing 095 and climbing through 35,000 feet after the lead's active transmission, was building his own fire control solution on Contact 2. The spread formation had created a new geometry. Contact 151 kilometers from the lead, Contact 253 kilometers from the Wingman. Both locked, both in solution. The N036 STT on the Hawkeye went silent at 5:03 a.m. Whether Contact 2 had broken its lock on the Hawkeye or redirected its N036 toward the now emitting APG-81 sources could not be determined with certainty. The Hawkeye controller reported, "Sentry, N036 STT emission terminated. Both contacts now in wide sector EW scan mode. No new STT detected." At 5:03 a.m. and 30 seconds, range to Contact 1, 46 kilometers. Contact 2, 48 kilometers. Both F-35C fire control solutions remained green. At 5:03 a.m. and 51 seconds, the N036 on Contact 1 went to a mode the Hawkeye controller had not seen from this platform before. Not standard sector scan, not single target track. A compressed, rapid sweep pattern that the Electronic Intelligence Library matched to a designation used in technical assessments of the N036's electronic countermeasures mode. An emissions profile designed to detect LPI mode, AESA radars, by looking for the characteristic spectral characteristics of frequency-hopped transmissions rather than the sustained beam of a conventional radar. The Su-57 was not trying to track the F-35Cs with its own radar. It was trying to detect the F-35C's radar by its emission signature. The lead recognized what the Hawkeye controller was describing 1.4 seconds before the controller finished the characterization. It was the correct tactical adaptation by a crew that understood the geometry. You cannot beat LPI stealth by searching for aircraft. You beat it by searching for the characteristic signature of LPI radar itself, which is different from noise in ways that a sufficiently capable receiver can detect. The question was whether the N036's ECCM mode was sufficiently capable. The lead switched the APG-81 to a non-standard LPI submode that the system's electronic countermeasures library had been updated to include within the past 8 months. The transmission pattern changed in a way that the frequency hopping analysis the N036 was apparently conducting would find significantly harder to separate from background. The change took 0.4 seconds and cost 6% of fire control confidence on Contact 1, dropping the solution from green to high amber. The Wingman, reading the lead's emissions change on his own passive sensors, matched the sub-mode change without a radio call. Fire control solutions. Contact 1, 87% confidence. Contact 2, 84%. Amber high. Valid for employment under current ROE conditions. 38 kilometers range on Contact 1. 40 kilometers on Contact 2. At 5:04 a.m., the Su-57s turned. Not a spread response this time. A coordinated turn, both contacts simultaneously, 30 degrees right, noses pulling northeast. The heading change was measured and deliberate.
It opened the range to both F-35Cs while rotating the Su-57's frontal stealth aspect toward the lead's APG-81, presenting their lowest cross-section face to the tracking radar. The turn also placed both Su-57s on a bearing back toward their departure airfield. It was not an aggressive disengagement, not the committed afterburner break of a crew that had been thoroughly dominated. It was a professional reorientation by pilots who had assessed the tactical situation and determined that continuing the approach no longer served whatever purpose had been intended. Range opening. Contact 1, 43 kilometers and increasing. Contact 2, 45 kilometers and increasing. The lead held both solutions through the opening geometry, tracking the Su-57s as they climbed through 32,000 feet on their northeast heading, watching the range numbers on the HMD increase with the steady geometry of retreat. The fire control solutions remained valid to 75 kilometers. They faded through amber to low confidence above 80 kilometers as the Su-57's reduced frontal cross-section and increasing range combined to push the APG-81's confidence below employment parameters. At 5:06 a.m., range to contact 1, 74 kilometers. The N036 emissions on both contacts went to standby, no transmissions. The Su-57 crews had gone electronically silent as they egressed. Whether this was operational security for the return transit or a signal that the engagement phase was definitively concluded was a question that the behavior of the aircraft answered more clearly than any transmission could. Both contacts were climbing, accelerating, heading northeast. They were not turning back. The lead held passive track on the N036 standby emissions, residual electronic signatures from a radar in standby mode, until contact 1 reached 112 kilometers. At that range, with the Su-57s above 35,000 feet and accelerating toward Mach 1.2, the passive track degraded below useful quality. The contacts were going home. At 5:07 a.m., the lead transmitted. Sentry, Falcon lead. Both contacts egressing northeast, bearing 042, range 115 and opening. No N036 STT on any friendly asset since 5:03. Solutions terminated. RTB in progress. Fuel state bingo plus 14. Bingo plus 14. The intercept had consumed less fuel than a kinetic engagement would have required. F-35C operating cost at $12,000 per flight hour for 14 minutes since the redirect, $2,800 per aircraft. Both aircraft, $5,600. 2 AM120D seeker recertification cycles at approximately $18,000 each, $36,000. Total operational cost of proving the geometry, $41,600. No ordnance expended. No airspace yielded. The intelligence picture developed during 14 minutes of direct observation of Su-57 operational behavior, N036 emission modes, formation tactics, ECCM capability, and RWR response time, incalculable, and already being processed by analysts whose morning had just become considerably more interesting than their briefing had suggested. The debrief ran for 4 hours and 40 minutes. The first finding, the Su-57's radar cross-section at frontal aspect, as measured by the APG-81's calibrated returns at multiple ranges and aspect angles, was smaller than the conservative estimate and larger than the optimistic estimate in the current intelligence assessment. The measured value would update the threat database and would narrow the confidence band on every future intercept planning document that referenced the Su-57. The number was classified. Its operational implication was not. The comfortable BVR dominance margin the F-35C maintained against legacy platforms was compressed against the Su-57, though not eliminated.
At 62 kilometers in LPI mode, the fire control confidence gap between engaging a flanker and engaging a Felon was 12 to 14 percentage points. At the ranges relevant to AIM-120D employment, that gap mattered less. At the ranges relevant to detection and positioning, it mattered considerably. The second finding, the 0.4-second N036 pulse that had illuminated the Wingman at 4:58 a.m., remained ambiguous. The duration was insufficient for the RWR to characterize the emission mode, and the intelligence assessment could not determine whether the pulse represented a deliberate targeting attempt in an LPI tracking mode or incidental sector scan emission at an unfavorable range. The ambiguity was noted, flagged, and would remain unresolved until additional collection against the Su-57's N036 in controlled conditions could characterize the system's LPI performance envelope more precisely. The third finding, weighted first by every pilot in the room, the Su-57 crews had responded to an active APG-81 lock in 0.6 seconds with a coherent, pre-briefed formation response, followed within 90 seconds by N036 adaptation to an ECCM mode designed specifically to detect LPI-AESA emitters. They had not panicked. They had not broken immediately. They had executed a professional, layered response, adapted their sensors to the specific capability being used against them, and disengaged when continuing was tactically unjustifiable. The lead's comment for the operational summary: these were not the same adversary. Not in sensor capability, not in tactical sophistication, not in the speed of in-flight adaptation. The margin existed. It was smaller than the planning documents had modeled. It had held tonight. It would require active maintenance to hold tomorrow. 2 Su-57s, 2 F-35Cs, 38,000 feet, 140 kilometers from first detection to engagement geometry, 14 minutes from redirect to RTB. Airspace yielded 0. Ordnance employed 0. Peer threat assessment updated, confirmed. Message delivered to the intelligence community. The gap is real. The gap is narrower than the estimate. Both sides know how narrow, now. That knowledge belongs to both of them equally. At 5:20 a.m., the eastern Mediterranean above the exercise area was quiet. The Hawkeye continued its orbit. The Allied ships below continued their tracks. The sky above 30,000 feet was clear and cold and full of stars, unmarked by contrails from aircraft that had not used their afterburners, leaving no record in the sky of what had happened there. The radar tapes had everything. The debrief team would spend 4 days reading them,